We live in an era where practically all danger has been eliminated. Through automation, modern medicine, and technology, almost every concern you would have considered could be solved in an instant. And now, with the introduction of AI through programs like Chat GPT, we are progressing even further along to where eventually all threats will be exterminated from our existence. And no, I am not referring to something like Terminator or Skynet. I mean computers synthesizing answers to the world's conundrums like the energy, food, and disease crisis some regions face. Now let's take a second and rewind the clock 100 years before the golden age of modern technology, and you're looking at everyday practical fears that people face. One example is the real mortality of children that we do not even reflect today. If you lived during the 1900s, you had a 1 in 4 chance of dying before the age of 5. Imagine that. You had a 25% chance at life as a child. So, in essence, a quarter of us would not be around today if we were born 100 years ago. And that was just one of the everyday fears that people dealt with during this time. Compare that to today, where in the US, if you or your child or your friend's kid even has a sniffle, they can go to a walk in clinic within an hour, usually for something simple like a common cold, leading to the current mortality rate being under 1%. Back in 1923, they did not have these luxuries, and people had everyday dangers they dealt with. Let's rewind the clock even further to the early 1800s, where you only had a 50% chance to live past the age of 5. So, literally, half of us would have been dead due to disease, malnutrition, or an accidental death by 5. And as an adult, you dealt with the real physical dangers the world bared as communities were not interconnected like they are today. Wilderness still predominantly existed over us during this age. If you wanted to get to the next town 20 miles over, you didn't have a car or the highway system and roads we know today. The main mode of transportation was either horse, carriage, or for many, walking. And you had the real dangers of the wilds moving just between your little town and the next one over, just a few miles away, running the risk of catching the eye of a predator, or worst case scenario, bandits. Does anyone remember playing Oregon Trail? You know the one, the old 90s game of wagon travel where you could die from one wrong choice and dysentery seems to get you on every playthrough. That paints an amazing image of what people dealt with in the early 1800s. And I am not saying the world was out to get people during this time, but tangible threats existed in the physical reality around everyone because technology would not be invented really for another 150 years to connect the world as we know it today. So sounds fun, right? I expect many of you to say no, just based on the fact that you were literally a coin flip away from death before the age of 5. So why am I discussing the past fears we humans faced? Well, simply to illuminate on the fact that we as a modern society do not face the physical fears, at least in the West, that our ancestors dealt with daily, but rather have a newfound set of perceived dangers in this modern world. In short, the physical world has been domesticated, but now that leads the non physical or the mind to be tamed, as that is where most of the demons we face lie within our own minds. Now, I really wanted to hone in on the three main fears I experienced growing up and still battle today, as you may be going through something similar. And I believe these are the things that everyone needs to conquer to excel in life. And no, it's not something like a fear of heights, snakes, or planes, as those relate to one of the areas I will talk about, but those I would align with phobias and not the purpose of this video. And without further ado, what are those three fears? First, a fear of failure. Second, the fear of death. Third, a fear of the unknown. And we will start with the fear of failure, as I imagine many of us hate that feeling of doing something wrong or failing in general. Have you ever failed before? I imagine everyone here has screwed up at least once in their life. Be it you made the wrong financial move with an investment, maybe you messed up in a relationship, misunderstanding someone's intent, leading to you drifting apart, or you failed at a test miserably, getting an F, completely wrecking your GPA for a class. Don't worry, as I give all of these examples, as they are just a few of the many failures I have dealt with to this day. And that's just a short part of a very long list. And if you answered that you have never failed at anything in your existence, well, kudos to you, because you are either A, lying, or B, a perfect specimen of a human and should be studied for generations to come. And I will let you decide which category you fall into as I try to limit my judgments of others. Now, understand, failure is a part of life. It's a mechanism we experience that allows us to learn from our mistakes and try to incorporate those learnings so we do not make that decision again in the future or a similar one. Ironically, however, most people, including myself, typically will make the same mistake over and over and over again, revolving in a cycle of failing at the same thing, kind of like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. This eventually, for a lot of us, freezes us to where we limit our engagement in such activities. Furthermore, most of us don't like to fail because it just does not feel good, even though it can be used as such a beneficial tool if utilized properly, and I'll discuss that in a bit. I mean, do you like failing? Because I sure as shit do not. I abhor the feeling of messing up a project or a decision, dwelling on it for days on end, thinking I could have done it this way or that way. This mindset eventually leads us to not taking risks because we're afraid we'll botch it up like we've seen in the past. I recall when I tried to learn to ride a bike as a kid. I was a proud little squirt and wanted to impress my dad, like every 5-year-old wants to. You know, to be the head honcho of the cul-de-sac, showing off to all the other kids still on training wheels. Funny enough, I was not smart enough to wear elbow and knee pads and fell off that Schwinn within 30 seconds, hopping on, completely scraping up my knees. And I will tell you, pain can be a fantastic teacher. However, I did not want to ride that bike again because I was too scared I was going to scrape up my knee again. But I also didn't understand that sometimes growth requires a bit of pain. Fast forward a month, and some family friends were visiting us, and I see my best friend at the time riding his bike around our little slice of the street, and I was a little jealous. Within 5 minutes of that, I was on my bike trying to figure out how to ride the damn thing. I kept falling off, but this time I had knee pads and knew how to catch myself when falling. And I kept falling a lot and getting back up a lot. And eventually I was able to remain balanced and boom, I was riding my bike. Honestly, if it wasn't for that little push of seeing my friend riding his bike, I would have not had the tenacity to push past the failure and keep on trying. So what am I getting at with this anecdote? Well, we all metaphorically and in some cases literally fall. It's just about how quickly you can dust yourself off and get back up. We all fail. We all screw up. We all drop the ball. We all miss the game-winning touchdown. We all lose the race. It's part of life and a part of learning. But you have to decide how you wish to reflect upon these failings. You can either let them keep you discouraged or use them to your advantage to get back up and try again until you get it right. Understand, failing is a part of the human experience. Everyone that's lived, lives, and will ever live will royally screw up at some point in their life. But I encourage you to look at it from a perspective of an opportunity to learn what not to do so you can make the best decision the next time. And of course, if you're not afraid of failing, you might be afraid of Old Grim. Ah, the end game. The question we all want to know the answer to. What happens to us after we die? And to tell you the truth, I have no idea and no inkling to find out soon. I have my own beliefs that I will share with you, but I have absolutely no clue what happens to us when our bodies finally give out and we pass on. But I do know one absolute truth that stands the test of time. Like the laws of thermodynamics and gravity, we all die, or at least our bodies die. And I will dive into what I mean by that in a bit. Your form is not immortal. Your body will eventually age and wither away, just like your friends and families. None of us are impervious to the clock moving forward. This world is temporary. Everything you see, hear, feel, taste, and touch will eventually become non existent. The world is ever changing, and everything is essentially a fleeting part of it. This is not some fairy tale where Dracula exists and you can live for eternity. This is reality. And accepting that fact that your form will eventually end is honestly the most liberating thing. Because it means none of us are special. The worms eat us all the same, be it a peasant or a king, a president or a convict. Take a moment and think about that for a second. And let me ask you this. Is there really any reason to be afraid of dying? If it happens to everyone and everything, then why do so many of us fear it? Maybe it's rooted in not leaving behind a legacy you are proud of, or you regret the life you have lived. Or maybe it's rooted in the unknown of what comes after, which I think most of us are concerned with. Well, my friend, no, you are not alone. I believe most of us ask ourselves these questions at some point. But because it's the final experience, many approach it with fear rather than acceptance. Why not greet death as an old friend rather than fearing it? Maybe if you were not afraid to die, you would live your life how you truly wished. Now, let me spend a brief moment explaining my thoughts on the afterlife, as I mentioned before. I believe in the interrelationship between spirituality and science, and more specifically, the first law of thermodynamics, which states energy can be neither created nor destroyed, only transformed. And since we are truly energy, and no, I'm not talking about your body, I am talking about you, the conscious soul, or whatever you would like to call it. You never truly die, just transition to your next form, or what I refer to as your next adventure. So why be afraid of the inevitable? The bill comes due for us all, regardless of our status in life. I suspect there are more pressing things in your life than fearing Old Grim. And to leave you with the words of a wise wizard,
death is just another path, one that we all must take.
So where does fear really come from? We just discussed two fears we all need to conquer: failure and death. But where do these hail from? How did this powerful emotion come into existence in the first place? Well, I'll tell you. It's a rather simple answer, though. The unknown. Kind of rudimentary, right? You're probably expecting some long, convoluted answer. Hell, when making this video, I was expecting to give you a groundbreaking answer, but instead decided to boil it down to its root cause. Practically all fears, regardless of their form, come from the unknown. So what do I mean by that? Well, let me set a little context for you. Our minds are very powerful entities. They literally create and destroy worlds. They are the original quantum computers, and we have not even tapped into their full potential yet. However, they do have some flaws. One being, we do not know everything, or at least consciously know everything. And when presented with unfamiliar situations, feelings, or decisions, it likes to play games sometimes. It will fill that unknown with a ton of questions and doubt, filling the gap per se. Why? Well, most of us want to know the right answer to everything. We want to know what to do because we do not want to fail, like I discussed before. We are conditioned to not enjoy pain or screwing up. We want to learn and grow, but not with the required sacrifice and hurt that sometimes come with it. So our mind creates doubt to not do certain things within the unknown as to stop us from pursuing it, ultimately protecting us from a potential perceived pain. Funny enough, it's a debilitating trick that could block out great opportunities if we would just leave our comfort zone, if even only for a moment. And I am not calling anyone out, as I deal with this like everyone else. That's why you sometimes hear when people talk about a fear of heights or flying, they will ask questions like, what if I fall? What if an engine fails? What if we run into a storm? What if the plane was to crash? Their minds literally have created scenarios to bar them from participating in certain things, leading to phobias. You can apply this to our previously mentioned topics of failure and death as well. I would say most people are afraid of failing because of the uncertainty that comes with it. Same for death. No one truly knows what happens to us after we die, which leaves many questions like, is there a heaven and hell? Another classic example is asking someone on a date or for their number. You may start doubting, asking things like, do they think I'm attractive? Do they actually like me? What if I screw up on the delivery of asking them? What if the date is horrible? What if we do not vibe? And I would not be surprised if a lot of people go through that thought process when trying to get to know someone they are attracted to. I know I sure do. So what am I getting at? Well, the deep dark void of the unknown our mind so wisely creates is the crux for most fears. So I would say learn to conquer it, and most fears will surely follow. The bothersome part is that conquering the unknown is absolutely the hardest fear to overcome. Yet people that are able to take risks over and over again, regardless of the outcome, typically are successful. This is something I've been incorporating in my life in small increments to work towards mastery. And you can too. There is no reason to fear what you do not know or cannot see, as you are not alone. I'd say everyone shares this fear.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
If we all exhibit this emotion, then why should it feel special to us? Why not just take a step outside of your little bubble and try something new? Who knows? It may be the best decision you ever made. Failure, death, and the unknown are a part of the path, and recognizing that they are something to be mastered might be a goal to work toward, as it unburdens you from your mind holding you back. And I will leave you with this final question. If you could take one step or make one decision to overcome something you're afraid of, what would it be? And if you feel inclined, I'd love for you to leave a comment below with your response.